Mel Kiper Jr. is the perfect person to ask that question to. He joins us live from Dallas now. Mel, good morning.
Molly, good to be with you.
Allen facing quite a bit of scrutiny for those offensive tweets. Now, you were so high on Allen all along, putting him on our radar, saying he should go #1 overall. How do you see this affecting his draft stock?
Well, it's hard to say. It really is at this stage. I think Cleveland, the Browns at #1. If, in fact, it is Baker Mayfield, that decision evidently was made a month ago. Nobody knew. John Dorsey, the GM, was keeping that very quiet and keeping it in-house so nobody would leak that out. You've heard Sam Darnold. Everybody had Sam Darnold projected there. I had Josh Allen. Now everybody seems to be on the Baker Mayfield bandwagon, thinking he could be the #1 pick now. So I think it's going to be interesting to see if he gets to 5 and say the Jets take Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield, who doesn't go 1. Will a team still trade up, give up extra draft picks to get up, say, that 5 spot where Denver's picking, Molly, and draft Josh Allen there? You hear Buffalo, you hear Arizona is teams that have Josh Allen very high up on their board and have a strong interest in Josh Allen. We'll see if that obviously happens when we tee it up tonight.
Mel, I know when I think of Baker Mayfield, I think of 83 touchdowns and just 14 interceptions over the last 2 years, plus 2 trips to the NCAA Final Four in terms of the college football playoff system and what have you. That would be the case for me. You know, his competitive fervor, his championship credentials. That would be the case for me as to why he should go #1. But I'm not Mel Kiper Jr., baby. You obviously felt otherwise. What's the case against him being the #1 overall pick in your mind?
Well, you're talking about the #1 pick for a 6'1" quarterback, #1, Stephen A. And that's something unique to that position. You say, well, Michael Vick went #1 at 6 foot. That did happen. Michael Vick was a big-time talent who had a tremendous arm and had 4.5, 4.4 speed. Where, Baker Mayfield's not that type of athlete, doesn't have that type of escapability. Even though he can move around, he's not going to outrun even some defensive linemen in the NFL. And you saw him get stung with a hit against Georgia. So I think you look at Baker Mayfield and the antics, the maturity which has to come once he's in the league. And ironically, you talk about maturity, he's 23. Sam Darnold's only 20 right now. So I think the maturity, will it come with Baker Mayfield? So the antics is eliminated. If that does happen, then I think he certainly, with what we've seen so far, he has a chance to have a very successful NFL career.
Mel, is it my imagination, or is there more intrigue in terms of who's going to fall where in this draft than really any I can remember in recent years? Because running backs recently have been taken up high, and there's Saquon Barkley, because the quarterbacks, as you just said, the presumptive #1 now is just over 6 feet tall. It seems like there's more stuff up in the air. What's your impression of that compared to recent drafts?
Max, it's just trying to figure out where the quarterbacks are going to go. That's been the whole thing. And then once you can do that, and Barkley is, identified as a New York Giant pick at #2, if you really think that's going to happen, and I do right now think that's the way it's going to go, and Molly will be happy to hear the 2nd pick overall could be Saquon Barkley.
Yes,
Probably
sir.
will be, hopefully, for the Saquon Barkley fans, as Molly is one of them, but I think one of many. He's a great kid. He deserves to be up there at #2. But where does the next position player go? Does Bradley Chubb go for defensive end from NC State? And then after that, when do the trades occur? Is it at Denver at 5, Indianapolis at 6? Do they take Roquan Smith, the linebacker from Georgia, or do they take a Quentin Nelson, the guard from Notre Dame? So there's going to be some 2-player scenarios mixed into this equation. And I think it's going to be fun when we get to the middle of the first round, guys, to see where does Lamar Jackson, where does Josh Rosen fall, particularly Lamar Jackson. He's red hot right now. You hear about several teams maybe trying to move up to get Lamar Jackson in the middle of the first round.
Mel, I want to get a little personal here when it comes to you in terms of this draft for this reason. Because when you speak, I listen. And I remember years ago, you always said when it comes to the running back position, you're highly reluctant to take somebody high because you can always get a running back. There are so many other needs. It's very difficult to find gems at those other positions. Wait on a running back. Don't do that early. Have you changed? And if so, is it because of an Ezekiel Elliott presence and the kind of impact you've seen that's had on the Dallas Cowboys? So you think that way along the lines of Saquon Barkley? Is Saquon Barkley just that special, or are your feelings still the same as they were from years ago?
Well, here's my feelings on it, Stephen A. They really haven't changed. I've always said if the running back's grade is in line with where you're picking, and the head coach and the offensive coordinator are pounding on that table, we have to have this guy. As a GM, I would say, okay, I have a philosophy against it, but the grade is in line, whether it be Adrian Peterson, whether it be Trent Richardson. His grade was certainly in line, and he's been a bust. There was a bust in the NFL. Then you go to Ezekiel Elliott, Todd Gurley, Leonard Fournette, now Saquon Barkley. Those grades are in line. Now, if you're talking about Saquon Barkley, say, was rated as the 7th best player in this draft on our board, I can't pound that table and say take him at 2, Stephen A. So that wouldn't happen. But he's number 1 on my board. You grade on ability, not on philosophy. So if you have to have him as a missing link in your Dave Gettleman, you take him at 2. So that's kind of the old caveat to that. The grade has to be in line with where you're picking. Say you're picking 10th, and you got the guy rated 7th or 8th. Take him. If he's rated 16th, you don't take him at 10. So that's kind of I think the security blanket there going against that philosophy with running backs.
But even if that's the case, Mel, if another guy can approximate, let's say Sony Michel can approximate what he can do, and people think, let's just say, he's going to go in the 2nd round, doesn't that affect Barkley, right? You can get another player that's hard to find and pick up an approximation of Barkley. Or does Saquon Barkley offer you such a premium at that position that there's no approximation of him exactly?
Well, the great thing with Saquon Barkley, particularly with the Giants, Max, is that he can block so well. And for Eli Manning, that's been an issue with that line. And he's your last line of defense now is Saquon Barkley. And he can catch out of the backfield and from the slot down the field. And forget the return game. You don't want to risk him there. He did it in college, won't do it in the NFL more than likely. But his running style and his character. I mean, this is a high-character kid. On a scale of 1 to 10, he's a 15. So, yeah, I think you look at the blocking, though, so important for young backs. He does that exceptionally well, and the Giants need that to keep Eli Manning upright and give him time to throw the football. And as I said, Saquon in that scenario is your last line of defense, and he comes up big when he's put in that predicament, that situation. He's done very well.
Mel, quickly, you mentioned Lamar Jackson and how his stocks rose. What teams are you hearing are really interested, and where might he fall tonight?
It's a great question, Mike. I think Arizona is where I've had him going in the mock drafts last couple, so Arizona is certainly a possibility. You hear New England, you hear New Orleans, so there's different scenarios there. You also hear Arizona and Buffalo for Josh Allen. Whoever doesn't get up maybe to get Josh Allen ends up with Lamar Jackson, and then you have New Orleans, the heir apparent to Drew Brees with Sean Payton, with that offensive talent around the quarterback. That could be a good scenario to learn from Drew Brees with Sean Payton. We saw what Bill O'Brien did with Deshaun Watson. We saw what Sean McVay did with Jared Goff. You get the right coach, the right offensive guru with the quarterback of that skill set, you could be looking at really something entertaining and special 2 to 3, 4 years down the road.
Mel Kiper, of all the names we've been hearing, you know, all the quarterbacks, with a Saquon Barkley, with a Bradley Chubb, with a Nelson out of Notre Dame, who do you expect to plummet out of those names, out of the aforementioned names that we've heard leading up to the draft over the last few weeks?
Well, based on my latest mock draft, it's up on ESPN.com right now, Stephen A., it would be Minkah Fitzpatrick, the defensive back from Alabama, who I like. He's a good football player. He's a playmaker, incredibly smart. Just because you drop a little bit doesn't mean you won't be a Pro Bowl player. Let's make that clear here. Just because you drop a little bit doesn't mean you're not going to play better than the guys that go earlier. Minkah will come in. Maybe he drops to 14 to Green Bay. Because he's a corner safety, he doesn't have that defined position. People already see Derwin James. They can see him as a great safety from Florida State. They can see Denzel Ward as a great corner from Ohio State. They can't picture where Minkah Fitzpatrick's going to be great. So because of that versatility to play everywhere for Nick Saban, that kind of hurts him a little bit in this draft process, which could push a guy that maybe should be a top 5 to 6 pick, maybe down to that 10 to 14 range.
Why hasn't Mason Rudolph been kind of wish cast into the top tier of quarterbacks? We know a lot of these teams are thirsty for quarterbacks. Lamar Jackson, now you see shooting up, right? Because there's another guy who might be the guy. Why haven't we heard more about Mason Rudolph?
I think the main thing is, Max, when you look at the competition and you look at the way he's thrown the football, which is effective but not on the move. Some of these other quarterbacks can move around and give you more of that dimension. I haven't been able to figure out Mason Rudolph. I've said that's the one quarterback. You can say, well, you're going to be wrong, you're going to be right. Some of you just don't really have a strong conviction on and a strong opinion on. I don't have one on Mason Rudolph. I don't know what kind of quarterback he would be. I have less of a conviction even on Baker Mayfield. I don't know what kind of quarterback Baker Mayfield will be. So I think Baker Mayfield, to me, and Mason Rudolph are two very difficult quarterbacks for me to project forward and think they will be great. So I think Mason could go 28. There's talk that Philadelphia could trade out of that. 32, could trade out of 32. Or, as I've graded him, guys, I have graded him as a second-round quarterback. So I think that's where he could come off the board. And I think New England, you look at New England with 2 twos, looking to get a quarterback, they could look at Mason Rudolph possibly, or a Luke Falk from Washington State, maybe second or third round.
Well, I'm not going to lie. I'm having serious FOMO right now that I'm not in Dallas, but I am so excited for tonight. I cannot wait. We'll be watching you all night. Appreciate your insight as always.
Thanks a lot, Mel.
Always fun. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks, Molly.
Okay, talk soon. Still to come, we'll ask Louis Riddick about Allen from a front office perspective, plus a current player will weigh in on whether or not he'd want Josh Allen in his locker room after those racially offensive tweets. We'll also ask that player, Landon Collins, if the Giants should draft Eli Manning's eventual replacement at quarterback with the second pick in tonight's draft. First take.
My boy is hyped.